Hurricane disaster response in Puerto Rico is a blot on the American reputation.
And yet we need to be careful about how we interpret the data.
The American Religious Town Hall meeting is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here's your host and moderator, Pastor Jerry Lutz.
Thank you, and I too would like to welcome you here to this edition of the American Religious Town Hall meeting. We're so very glad you've joined us today. Looking forward to this discussion. It's hot off the press in terms of it being a recent event, and we have panelists here who are prepared and ready to discuss it. You've already heard from two, but we're going to have the others introduce themselves and also the ones that you've just heard to. Let's start with the gentleman to my right. We'll go around and have them tell us a little bit about what they do.
I am Canon John Peterson. I am an Episcopal priest, canonically resident of the Diocese of Washington, D.C.
My name is Mel Robeck. I'm Senior Professor of Church History and Ecumenics and Special Assistant to the President for Ecumenical Relations at Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena, California. I'm also a minister with the Assemblies of God.
And I'm Tom Plumley. I'm a minister in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. I serve as the Senior Minister of First Christian Church in Fort Worth, Texas.
I'm Andrea Luxton. I'm president of Andrews University in Berrien Springs, Michigan, which is affiliated with the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Hi, I'm Carl Troval, the Richard J. Dinda Professor of Lutheran Identity and Mission at Concordia University in Austin, Texas, a university affiliated with the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod.
Hi, I'm Tony Matthews, and I'm the senior pastor at North Garland Baptist Fellowship in Garland, Texas.
Well, thank you. Thank everyone for being here today, and we're certainly glad that you've joined us for this program. I hope you're looking forward to this discussion as I am. Let's get right to it, shall we? In September of 2017, the island of Puerto Rico, a territory of the United States, whose people are American citizens, sustained massive damage from two major hurricanes. Hurricane Maria, the larger of the two, hit the island barely 2 weeks after Hurricane Irma had laid waste to much of the island's infrastructure. Roads were washed away, thousands of homes were damaged or destroyed, bridges were collapsed, and power and water and sanitation were interrupted for long periods. In some of the more remote parts of the island, electricity was not restored for more than 6 months. Deaths on the island multiplied. The government of Puerto Rico cited the hurricanes as the cause of death for 64 people. However, a study published in the New England Journal of Medicine says the real number is closer to 4,700 and perhaps as many as 8,000 people. The study found that many of the lives lost were because of the destruction of telecommunications and loss of access to medical care. There has been much discussion about whether or not the response of the government of the United States was quick enough. Some have said it was a slow response because Puerto Rico is not a state. Others blame it on racism. Still others say that recovery slowed down simply because it is more difficult to get massive amounts of aid to an island, and the Puerto Rican government itself is to blame. Whatever the case, religious communities are concerned anytime there is such massive loss of life and livelihood. I'd like our panelists to consider at least 3 questions today, and that is this. What could be the reason for the vast discrepancy in the reports of the death toll from the storms? Second question, does race ever play a part in our responses to crisis, and did it play a part in Puerto Rico? And then finally, what can religious communities do to help relieve the suffering of the citizens of Puerto Rico, or for that matter, the citizens of any place disaster strikes? Well, that's our topic for today, and those are the questions. I'd like to return to those who helped to begin the program. We go back to Reverend Plumley. Reverend Plumley, tell us more about your thoughts on this subject, please.
Thank you. I simply wanted to point up the fact that it just seems that the response that we've had to this major disaster in Puerto Rico has differed so greatly from the response that we have to natural disasters that are on the mainland United States. And we can try to point fingers. I think the fingers probably need to be pointed in several directions at the federal government, probably at government or at least infrastructure in Puerto Rico itself. But the plain fact is that the number of people that have died and who continue to suffer dire consequences from those hurricanes is just astronomical. In, I guess, typical what we've gotten used to as pretty regular self-aggrandizing hyperbole. The government said that the U.S. response, the federal government's response, was massive, historic, and unprecedented. Unfortunately, it was none of those things, it was slow. We came out with this excuse that well, they're an island, as if we don't have forms of transportation that can move things across the water or over the above the water and by air. And something else needs to be said. When something like this happens, the people at the top, the person at the top, the president, really sets the tone for what our response will be. And I think that our president can be criticized for a real dearth of positive concern. He went there very late, and was shown, tossing rolls of paper towels like he was shooting baskets. That was very different from similar storms on the mainland, specifically Harvey on the south coast of Texas, where the response was very different, and his presence was there, and the First Lady was there, and it was just very different. And so one has to begin asking questions. What's the difference between citizens, United States citizens who live in Puerto Rico, and United States citizens who live in Texas or Florida or someplace else where we've had hurricanes? And I'll just leave it with the questions.
All right, thank you very much. And then Dr. Trovall, you also started with an opening statement. You were suggesting some caution, though, about interpreting information. Want to say more about that, please?
Sure. I think probably more than anything, it's about the discrepancy between 64 and up to 8,000 people. So because data can be interpreted variously. First, I want to say thank you, Tom, because I agree that the response was insufficient compared to how we respond to things on the mainland. Puerto Rico is a commonwealth. Puerto Ricans vote in our elections. Puerto Ricans are citizens. And I don't think all Americans really know that. I mean, I've seen YouTube videos where people clearly didn't know that. But about the data, a lot of it boils down to, first of all, these were some of the death counts from various agencies. The official count was 64. CNN said 499. The New York Times said 1,052. And the New England Journal of Medicine said 4,695. It was a study conducted by Harvard. Now, this data is interpreted in different ways and actually counted in different ways. How do you record a death, and what's a specific death as a result of a hurricane? There are a number of ways that you can do this. You can say they're the direct deaths. I would venture to guess that probably the Puerto Rican count is of direct deaths. We know people who actually got hit by a tree that was blown over or a house that collapsed. But when you have infrastructure fail, for instance, let's say a cell phone goes down, electrical grid goes down, and someone has a heart attack or appendicitis attack. Your phone doesn't work. You can't get to the hospital. You die. Was that because of the hurricane? Well, it isn't a direct cause. It's an indirect cause. So the question is, Are these numbers direct deaths? Are these numbers indirect deaths? And then you have the question about death certificates and how they're handed out and the procedure to go. What if you can't get someone to come out and declare someone to be dead because you need to do that officially? Is that person, when do they get counted? At what point in time? And then I also found that the Harvard study did a comparison of mortality rates in the year that there was not a hurricane, in the year that there was a hurricane, the average amount of deaths versus the average amount of deaths. And that's how they come up with their number. Well, that's also an interesting, it's a completely different way to get a number. My point is that this data, you have to be careful. It doesn't indicate that somehow there was a failure just because of the death rates. But it does suggest that we need to be careful about when we hear things, what does the data mean?
All right, thank you very much. And now let's go over to Dr. Luxton. Glad to have you here today from Andrews University. You're the president there. You're very busy, I'm sure. Thank you for coming today. What is your take on this subject, please?
It's actually interesting. At our university, we had a group of our graduate architecture students that were on their way to Puerto Rico and were due to leave just as the hurricane hit. Obviously, they couldn't go, but they were on probably the first or one of the first commercial flights into Puerto Rico afterwards, and they changed their direction to hurricane relief. What was interesting was, first of all, the airline allowed them a load of extra free luggage to take as many supplies as they could get in there to be of relief, so there was an intent to help. And their feedback when they came back was just mainly about just the plight of the people. I mean, it was clear to them, being on the ground very, very early, that there was a lack of response from a lot of quarters, but there was that feeling that people didn't know what to do. That it was just so massive, and there was just from the local people a sense of helplessness. And when they were there to kind of help people do things, people were willing to kind of come around and help. But as a island and more corporately, it was more challenging. To me, the issue here is, for all of us, really, it's easy to cast the blame on here and here and here, but to me the question is, what is the value of a human life? Not just life and death, but living. And do we really think of everyone as equal? It's easy if you have a territory or if you have someone far off there to kind of push it away from us, as that's not our business. Right? And to me, that's the critical thing here, for all of us to ask ourselves, as well as to ask America, is how do we value every person that we have some potential of touching, and that falls under our responsibility.
All right, thank you very much. Canon Peterson, welcome to the program today. Your thoughts on the subject, please.
Yes, I've appreciated the conversation that we've heard. I think I might be tremendously naive, and that's okay, because I believe that the Hebrew Scriptures and the Christian Scriptures challenge us in times like this. I believe that we have a responsibility to our neighbor, to the sojourner, to the person outside the city gates, all those wonderful biblical terms. And I believe that if we fail, we are the one who's sinning. It's our sin. If we cannot reach out to someone who is a voting member of the United States, a citizen of the United States, if we cannot take care of the stranger outside of our borders, and by that I mean not even a person like from Puerto Rico, but from other countries that are in this type of a situation, we've lost our compass. And undoubtedly, this is racial. There are strong racial overtones to the decisions that have been made. And I think we have to be challenged on that as well. And how many more disasters do we have to face before we're willing to deal with the real issues?
All right, thank you. Dr. Robeck, welcome to the program. Your thoughts, please.
I want to go a slightly different tack. First of all, I want to say thank you for all that's been said. I think there's an awful lot there to chew on and a lot of good thoughts. I want to think about cost, okay? In the months going up to the hurricane, there was a lot of complaining in Puerto Rico about mismanagement of funds and the government being deeply in debt and asking the United States to bail them out of certain kinds of things. I think that has to be taken into consideration as well. It isn't simply an issue of the United States didn't do enough, which we didn't, okay, and we should have done it better. But it is also the case that people on the ground, people that live there in Puerto Rico, need to take some responsibility, especially, I would say, for infrastructure. Okay? I realize that a lot of it may be antiquated. I've only been to Puerto Rico once. I was not impressed with the infrastructure that was there. But I was sick most of the time I was there. And it's a difficult place, just as any place outside the borders of the U.S. are. But, you know, I'm thinking also that we need to think much more seriously about global climate change in this whole process. I mean, we don't know for sure that a hurricane of this magnitude would have hit Puerto Rico had there been no climate change. But since there is climate change, at least I'm convinced of it, we're seeing all kinds of things. And the expense of that is incredible. I mean, I live in California where everything's gone dry, and all of a sudden we're overcome with fires. The biggest fire in California history. You know, and it's in Northern California, it's in Southern California. Resources are too slim. We're not able to get at, you know, what needs to be done. And I think it's going to be increasing not just in California, but across the nation. Certainly we see that I think, in Puerto Rico and so forth. So, I mean, I think that's absolutely critical that lives matter no matter what color, what ethnicity, whatever background they are, lives matter. God is the God of life, and He asks His people to be people that are, in a sense, pro-life. And I'm not simply talking about abortion here. I'm talking about taking care of people and the quality of life that they have. I think it is part of our responsibility as Christians.
And thank you. Dr. Matthews, your point of view on this.
Yes, I want to begin by saying the Southern Baptist Convention, I was very happy to see the response that the Baptists had with the tragedy in Puerto Rico from a national perspective, and of course in the state of Texas, the Southern Baptist of Texas Convention, they were involved as well. And I think our Baptist agencies, they do a great job with disaster relief abroad and certainly in different places in the United States. A common denominator with the Hurricane Maria is with every president, almost every president, we have a national natural disaster. Hurricanes, tornadoes, fires, I mean, it can be all kinds of things. And I try to pause, and the blame is Maria. And if you are in leadership, and I'm not a fan of either the presidents, the current one or prior ones. So I'm not here to defend or to blast the presidents. I do know that if you are in leadership, you're going to get the blame. I'm very slow to assign or assume that a group or a person or agencies are quote unquote racist just because something is racial. I think there's a big distinction there. And the reason I'm sensitive to that is because racism is real. And as a person who has experienced racism, I think it's really important. I may bring a level of sensitivity to that, because if everything is racism, nothing is racism. And true victims of racism will be overlooked. And I think so. So now, having said that, I think, real quickly, General Honore, you guys remember him, the Katrina. He did a great job. And I agree with him. He says that our response was slow and small. And he said the problem was, when you want to save lives, it's war. And you have to get folks in there. And we could have done a better job. But the racial component is racial. I don't know if it's racism. With Maria, other areas, that's up for questions.
Well, thank you. Clearly, we were needing more time for this discussion because we're out of time for this segment. It went by so quickly. But there is an important announcement I'd like for you to hear. Then we'll come back for the summations.
Thank you, Pastor Lutz. We hope you are enjoying today's program. If you would like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the mission and history of the program, learn about the Town Hall estates, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, Pastor Lutz looks forward to receiving your letters. You may write to him at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. That's Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. Thank you for writing, and thank you for watching. And now, back to you, Pastor Lutz, and today's closing statements.
Thank you, Mark. I do look forward to hearing from you, and I hope I hear from you this week as a result of your watching today's program. And I will encourage you, as Mark has, to go to the website. You can there see some archived programs and learn more about the Town Hall estates. Now let's go to our summations. Let's begin with Canon Peterson. You're first.
Thank you. We've been speaking about aid to Puerto Rico. And the Diocese of Massachusetts, the Episcopal Diocese of Massachusetts, has had its concern of taking care of the people who fled Puerto Rico because of the storms and taking care of them here. And one of the problems that the churches face there is that FEMA is calling people and trying to get them to go back to Puerto Rico while the churches, and they have no place to go, and the church is trying to help them find housing and providing that type of needs that a family has in a situation like that. And I think that that's a very important dimension of this response that we should have.
All right, thank you. Reverend Plumley, your summation.
Sure. I'd simply mention one statistic that I think marks the difference between the response we've had to Puerto Rico and the response to mainland natural disasters. FEMA grants began coming into Texas after Hurricane Harvey within 10 days of the hurricane. In Puerto Rico, it took 43 days before the first ones arrived. But I really appreciate Dr. Robeck's bringing up the issue of climate change because it is simply a fact that we are seeing a greater number of storms, and these have greater ferocity. They are more powerful when they hit and do more damage. And that's something that needs to be taken into consideration as we do our planning for infrastructure.
Thank you. Dr. Troval, your summation, please.
Three brief things. The first is that I think we need to have ongoing work on infrastructure, planned disaster response. And I mean, you can make plans and then the reality of a disaster totally throws your plans. It makes you realize it doesn't work, and so we need to keep working at that. I think the other is just, for those of you out in the viewing audience who want to give to these disaster relief, giving to your church body or your denomination is a tremendous way to do it because the administrative costs are so much less. And I always encourage people to do that first because they're paid for by your tithes and donations. And it goes, a lot of your relief goes directly to the people in need.
Oh, thank you for that reminder. And now, Dr. Matthews, your summation.
Yes, I just believe we should respond to disasters locally, globally, in the best way that we can. And I'm going to cut some of the agencies some slack because I don't know about logistics. And, you know, it's just whenever you have a hurricane or earthquake, it's just chaos. And we want to make sure that we do the best and pray for folks who are leading those charges.
Thank you. Dr. Luxton.
You know, I think we need to be careful from our position of living in a kind of sophisticated environment, how much we assume the places that are less sophisticated in their infrastructure can just sort it out. And I think sometimes our help and support needs to be at a deeper type of level. when our students were first going in, they were actually going into an area that was consistently and continually flooded, right? And the hurricane only made that worse. And their attempt was to help that community rethink their community in order to resolve and engage in some of the challenges of the community. And maybe that is something we need to be thinking about a lot more, rather than finding ways of criticizing those communities. We need to help them think about their infrastructure in a different way and be part of the solution.
All right, thank you very much. Dr. Robeck.
Yeah, a lot of things come through my mind. In 1991, my wife and I lost our house due to an earthquake. FEMA was there, fortunately for us, but it was a number of days. It wasn't 43 days, I can assure you, but it was probably 15 to 20 days before we saw relief. The reality is that there are lots of church organizations, as Carl has pointed out, that are on the ground helping in a variety of ways, as the Episcopal Church is in New England. We have the Convoy of Hope in the Assemblies of God. I was watching to see when are they going to be there. They were on the ground the day the earthquake happened in Haiti, but they were not on the ground when Puerto Rico came, and it was at least 10 days, I think, before they were there and distributing goods that were needed. So I think we have to, again, I want to cut some slack to some agencies for certain reasons, but I do think that the infrastructure could have been better if the people of Puerto Rico had been more responsible in the way money was being spent by the government.
All right, thank you very much. And thank you to everyone for participating in today's program. This is a very important subject, and we hope that as you've been watching, this maybe have sparked some ideas. Perhaps you can talk with some local authorities. Perhaps you can write some letters to people who are in positions of power. And if you're a member of a church or a local congregation of some kind, some religious community, you've heard some ideas here around the table today as to what you might be able to do to help alleviate some of the suffering that goes on as a result of these disasters we experience even in our own country and around the world. So thank you for tuning in today. We're looking forward to seeing you again next time. But for now, the Charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. And the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America, we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory, but in reality. So now, friends, until next week at the same time and over this very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. And may the God of all of us bless all of you.